Crochet Magical Mystery Tour. My name is Chris of Light and Joy Designs, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this super fast, squishy, and warm Tunisian knit booties. If you've never done Tunisian crochet before, today is the day to start because I'm going to show you how to do this. It's super easy and you are going to love these. They make a great gift any time of year, but especially now at the holiday season. So let's get started. Okay, so let's take a look at the materials you're going to need. And before we go over these, if you're excited to make this these booties, please give me a thumbs up in the down below, and be sure to subscribe because I have patterns that come out every single week with the Crochet Magical Mystery Tour. So for today's booties, you are going to need approximately 55 yards of wool ease thick and quick for each booty. So about 110 yards of wool ease thick and quick. That's for the large size that I'm making. And so you may need less. If you have a small foot, you might be able to get away with just one skein, one of their regular skeins. And if not, you may need a second skein. So you will also need a measuring tape, scissors, a yarn needle for sewing in the ends, and then 2 different crochet hooks. You'll need a Tunisian crochet hook in size 15 millimeter, and I'm using the Denise interchangeable set, which I'll have a link to down below. I highly recommend this set because you can make these any length that you need for any project you need, and you can also make them double-ended as well. And then for the cuff here, we're going to be using a smaller hook. So this one here is a 9.0 millimeter hook for that. So let's start this project. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to get 3 different measurements. You're going to want to know the width, the circumference around the widest part of your foot. That's going to be W. You're going to want to measure the length of your foot from the very back of your heel to the longest part of your foot, which is most people their big toe. And then you're going to also want to know the distance from your big toe or the end of your foot to where your foot meets your leg, and that's called the instep. Once you have those, we'll be able to determine how many rows and stitches we're going to be making. But first I want to show you the gauge that I have, that I've been using, and you will want to make your own swatch to check your gauge to make sure that, because you may crochet tighter or looser than I do, so you'll want to do a swatch. Okay, so my swatch was, I did it more than 5 inches to get this measurement. You should always, if you're going to be doing like a 4-inch by 4-inch swatch, your overall swatch should probably be at least 5 inches by 5 inches because you want to measure in the middle. So I did a large swatch, and mine was in a 5-inch by 5-inch square. I had 10 rows and 9 stitches, and that's using a 15 millimeter hook and the Lion Brand Wool Ease thick and quick. Okay, so this is our gauge right here. Okay, we're going to use that to determine the sizing. And what we need to know is 2 things. We need to know how many stitches to start with and how many rows to complete. So the stitches that we're going to need to start with is going to be our width. Okay, so width is going to equal the number of stitches, and length is going to equal the number of rows. Okay, because we're basically going to be making a rectangle with Tunisian knit stitch. All right, so let's just first of all take a look at the length. It doesn't matter what order you do these in. Okay, so the length of my foot was 9.5 inches. So to determine how many rows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my gauge for rows. So that's 10 rows is in 5 stitches. Since we have inches here, this is basically 9.5 over 1. We're going to want the inches to cancel out. So that's how you can know that the inches have to be on the bottom. So we're going to multiply by 10 rows over 5 inches. That's our gauge. And that gives us 95 over 5. And that gives us a total of 19 rows. Then for the width, you're going to measure, when you measure around the widest part of your foot, I want you to measure it tightly, okay? Because this yarn will stretch out over time. And so to make these booties fit nice and snug, that's my recommendation, is to measure them nice and get your measurement nice and tight. So the tight measurement around the width of my foot is 8.5 inches. So then I'm going to multiply that by my gauge for stitches. And the gauge for stitches is, I want my inches to be on the bottom, so that's 5, right? Because we knew our gauge is a 5 by 5 square. You might do a 4 by 4 square, or you may try to use my gauge. But like I said, my disclaimer is, if they don't fit and you didn't make your own swatch ahead of time, you may end up having a bootie that is not the size you want. So, okay, so then we're going to, the top part is going to be 9 stitches. So our inches are going to cancel out. We multiply 8.5 times 9 is 76.5. Divided by 5. And we get 15.3. And I rounded down because I know that I want a snug fit. Okay, if you came out with, like, say 15.6 or 7, you might want to round up depending on whether you crochet tightly or not. So that means we're going to start with 15 stitches and we're going to work 19 rows. So let's show you how to do that. All right, so for Tunisian crochet, we chain the amount of chains for the amount of stitches that we're going to have, that we're going to start with. So we're going to chain 15. So I'm just starting with a slip knot here. Tighten that up on your hook. Again, I'm using 15 millimeter. And we're just going to chain 15. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have 15 stitches, 15 chains, and with Tunisian crochet, what we like to do is we like to start into the back bump of our chain. So if you've crocheted before, you've probably worked into your chain into either one or two of these threads here in the front of the V's. But for Tunisian crochet, we're going to work into these back bumps instead. This first loop on our hook counts as our first stitch. So we're going to skip the first chain, we're going to go to the second chain, and we're going to go into this back bump here. Make sure that this loop is snug on your hook before you start, and go into that back bump of the second chain, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And then you're just going to do that in each back bump of the chain all the way to the end. And as your loops are coming onto your hook, you can kind of slide them down, get them out of your way. And if you're new to Tunisian, it may feel a little strange to have yarn under your hand, under your fingers. But don't worry, you will get used to that. And this is our forward pass. In Tunisian crochet, every row consists of two passes. The forward pass, where we add all the loops onto our hook, and then the reverse pass where we work them off. And so we're always working with the front side or the right side of our work in front of us. We don't turn our work. So for the reverse pass, it's very easy. You're just going to chain one, or sometimes they call it yarn over, pull through one. That creates your edge stitch. And we'll be coming back to this later. But as you can see, the edge stitch has 3 threads. It has this inside thread and then these 2 outside threads. So we'll be coming back to that when we do our second row. But I just wanted to point that out to you. Now we begin the rest of the return pass, which is we yarn over and we pull through 2 loops. And you just keep repeating that, yarn over, pull through 2 loops all the way back until you have only 1 loop remaining on your hook. Now as you're doing this return pass, you want to make sure that all of your stitches are uniform, that they're the same size. You don't want them too tight either, because otherwise your fabric won't have enough stretch in it. It'll be really tight. So you just want them to be just the size of your hook, okay? And like so. 1 loop left on our hook, that means we're done. So that's our first row completed. So for row 2, we're going to begin, that's basically our setup row or our foundation row. Now we're going to begin the first row of Tunisian knit stitch, which is, it is abbreviated TKS for Tunisian knit stitch. So this loop on our hook corresponds with our first stitch, this first vertical bar here. So we're not going to be working into that stitch. That stitch is already completed. But we're going to, so then the first stitch that we're going to actually make is going to be into this, this next stitch here. And we have a front vertical bar and a back vertical bar. You can see that all along. For the knit stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to go right in between those 2 stitches with our hook and put it all the way to the back of our work. Then we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And you just want it to be the same height as your first loop and all other loops. So let's do that again. So we get to the next stitch, we have this front vertical bar and then we have this back vertical bar. We're going to go in between the 2 of those, through to the back of the work, yarn over and pull up a loop. Again, making sure it's the same height. Okay, so and we're just going to work that all the way down to the end. And as you're going, you'll want to slide your work down. And with the knit stitch, this work may curl a little bit. You really want to make sure that those loops are being brought up to the same height, that you're not just pulling them through like this. You see that? That's like you're going to have a problem. Your work's going to be too tight in this direction then. So you really want to make sure that those loops are brought up to the right height. Okay? All right, so now we're back at that edge stitch. And remember I pointed out to you how we have three strands in the edge stitch. We have this inside strand right here, and then we have these two outside threads or strands. We're going to go on top of the inside one and underneath those outer two, and this is how we do our edge stitch. And then we just yarn over and pull up our last loop. Very simple. And then we just repeat the reverse pass. We're going to yarn over and pull through one loop, or essentially we just created a chain. And then we're going to yarn over and pull through two loops all the way back. To the end. Getting some yarn here. Just yarn over, pull through two all the way until you have just one loop left. All right, so we've just completed our second row. So an easy way to, we're going to do 19 of, or I'm going to do 19 of these rows. You are going to do whatever amount is going to equal the length of your foot. Now the other thing, the nice thing with this project is you're going to be able to kind of check it as you go along. In fact, you can even check this right now. This should be able to wrap around the widest, assume that this is my foot here, it's going to be able to wrap around the widest part of your foot. Now it might be snug, and it should be a little snug, and that's perfect. Okay, if it's really too loose, or if it's again, you're going to do this on your foot, not your hand. If it's really too loose, you might want to start over with less stitches. Or if it's really too tight, like you're really struggling to get it together, you might want to add some stitches. So that's kind of a nice thing about this pattern, is you can check it as you go if you're making it for yourself or someone that's in your house. And then you'll be able to also check this, the length, as you get to your 19 stitches. Sorry, your 19 rows, you're going to be able to check to see, does it come back to all the way to the back of your heel, to the front of your foot, to the longest part of your foot. You'll be able to check that. So I'm going to do a couple more rows here and show you what it starts to look like. And so I just did a third row, and you can see it does curl up as you're working on it, especially in the beginning. Don't worry about that at all, because that's all going to get worked out when we're completed. But I wanted to also point out to you, if you are new, if you're not new, you can skip over this. But as you're doing this, doing your knit stitches, you're going to, one of the things you're going to feel is like, this feels weird, having all this yarn underneath my hands. Am I doing this right? This feels funny. As long as your loops are uniform, you're doing it right. So, and then on our return pass here, the return pass can really feel even funnier, at least for me. Yeah, so it can feel a little funnier because you're trying to pull through these loops and they get a little bit, you know, too far apart. So just push them up and don't worry too much about it feeling weird having yarn under your fingers. You will get used to it. And you know, the nice thing about working with thick yarn is that stuff works up more quickly, and the downside with working with thick yarn is it is a little bit more muscular. It is a little bit more muscular for your hands to do this stitch, although on this small piece like this it's not that bad. So I'm just, you know, if you're used to doing Tunisian crochet, you can obviously skip over this part here, but I just wanted to have this in here for people who are newer to Tunisian so they can see what it looks like once you get going. And don't worry so much about speed. The speed will come. Just work on the technique, and then you'll just get faster and faster. And you will get faster pretty quick too. So again, don't worry about the curling. So this is how it's just starting to look. Now, for counting your rows, is a really nice thing about Tunisian crochet, and that is that we have these nice edges here, and it makes it real easy to check what row you're on. So you can just count. There's 1, 2, you can just count your V's, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've done 5 rows, and so that means I've got to do 14 more. So I will meet you when I have 19 rows, and we'll take you to the next step. One other thing I wanted to say to you is every time you start your row, always make sure that this first loop is snug on there, that it's not loose, because if it is loose, what will end up happening is the work on this side will be longer than on this side. So in order to have uniformity, always make sure that that first loop is nice and snug before you start your second loop. Okay, so I'm here at the end of my 19th row, and again, you can count these V's along the side to know what row you're on. And also you can check it against the bottom of your foot. From your heel to your toe should fit on top of this lengthwise. But before we do that, we're going to do a bind off, and we're just going to bind off in the same stitch. So in Tunisian crochet, after you finish your in Tunisian crochet, you always do a bind off after your last row. So we're going to be binding off in Tunisian knit stitch. So we're just going to do the same. We have 1 loop on our hook. We're going to go into that second stitch as if to do a knit stitch, just like we've been doing all along. Yarn over, pull up a loop. We have 2 loops on our hook, and we're going to slip stitch the second one into the first one. So then we go to the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and slip stitch it. You're just going to do that all the way to the end. And this tightens up that last row so that there's no spaces in here. Okay, and then we get to this last stitch and slip stitch. All right, so now we are ready to start the magic of turning this into a booty, and you will have this this nice finished edge here. So just do one more chain to before we start what we're going to do next. So what we're going to do is we're going to seam this up along your instep. Okay, so we took this measurement before here from where your foot meets your leg to your toe. That's your instep. For me, that's about 6.5 inches, and I checked along my work, and that was worked out to be about 12 stitches. So I'm going to seam up about 12 stitches. So let me show you how we do that. Okay, so to close up the inseam, I have my finishing loop on the hook. I'm going to go to this first edge stitch over here. I'm going to go in there, just snug up the loop, and then I'm going to yarn over, pull through a loop, and pull that loop through the loop on my hook. And I'm going to do that into each edge stitch. I'm going to go into the edge stitch on each side and slip stitch it along the way. Let me just bring this down a little closer. So I'm going to go into the next stitch over here and the next stitch on this side, yarn over, pull through a loop and pull it through the loop on my hook, go into the next stitch, so far I have 1, 2, 3, and I'm supposed to do 12 of these. I'm going to double check it against my measurement. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10, 11, and 12. All right, let me measure this. Okay, so that turned out to be more like 7 inches. I might need to take out one of those stitches. I'm just going to check this against my foot. 1 second. So I can show you here that actually that does look about right. So it's right up against where my foot meets my leg, and there's my toes. It's going to close up on the heel, so that's the right size for me. That's the right 12 stitches was right for me. Okay, so now we're going to work. I can show it to you next to the original one. So we've just sewn up the front of the booty. Now we're going to add the cuff. All right. Okay, so now this is where we switch hooks. So for working the cuff, we're going to work using this 9mm hook. And if you want, you can add a rubber band at the end, but there's going to be so few stitches, it won't really matter. So what we're going to do is we are going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we are going to start by going into the back bump of the second chain. So this is the first chain, this is the second chain. We're going to go into the back bump and we're going to pull up a loop. Always tighten this loop first. We'll pull up that loop, that's 1. We're going to work into the back bump of each of the chains. That's 2. And then the back bump of this chain is right here. It's a little harder to see. Okay, so now we have 4 loops on our hook, and now we're going to connect it to the edge stitch right here. We go in there and yarn over and pull up a loop. Now we have 5 loops on our hook. Now so we're basically working Tunisian crochet up and down, if you will, as we attach it to the already established work. When we're doing a return pass, when we're connecting work, we do just a slightly different. We don't do the yarn over pull through 1 at the beginning because we already have it attached here. That's essentially what this loop here is our yarn over pull through 1. So now we just do yarn over pull through 2 all the way back. Okay, and that's our first row of the boot cuff. So this boot cuff is going to be worked in 2 stitches. One is the Tunisian knit stitch that we've been doing all along, and we're going to alternate that with Tunisian reverse stitch. So we're going to start with the Tunisian reverse stitch. I'm going to show you how to do that. So this is our first stitch and this is our second stitch, and these are our front vertical loops here and here, and then here's our back vertical loop here and here. Okay, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to want to be going into that back vertical loop, and the easiest way to get into that is you're going to pull this yarn. We want that yarn behind us as we're doing this. Okay, so just kind of hold that off to the side. You're going to take your hook and you're going to go in between those 2 stitches like that. Then you're just going to turn your hook around and just grab that back vertical bar. Now you're in place to yarn over and pull up your first stitch, or technically your second stitch. So let's do that again. We're going to go in between these 2 stitches right there where my finger is. We want our yarn at the back. I'm going to come in through here, and then I'm just going to use my hook to grab that back vertical bar. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Just one more. I'm going to go in between those 2 stitches, and then I'm going to pop into that back vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now I'm going to attach it. I'm going to do an attachment stitch, go into that edge stitch there, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we'll do our reverse pass. And again, you should have 5 loops on your hook before you do your reverse pass each time. We're going to yarn over and pull through 2, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. All right, and that was our reverse stitch completed. Now we're going to work a row of knit stitch, just like we've been doing. And then we go into the edge stitch, and then we work our reverse pass. Yarn over, pull through 2, all the way to the end until we have 1 loop left. And now we go back to reverse stitch, go in between those 2 stitches, and grab that back vertical bar, and then we attach to the next edge stitch. And when you attach to that next edge stitch, make sure that it's not, too loosey-goosey. Keep it nice and snug so that your attachment is nice and secure. All right, so we just did reverse stitch. Now we do knit stitch again. We're just going to keep working like this. So now reverse stitch. Okay, got one more here. Now we're going to do knit stitch. 1, 2, 3. Reverse stitch. And the reason why we switched to the smaller hook is so that this will be nice and snug around your ankle. All right, so now we're going to come over, and the next line that we're going to do will attach to the edge stitch on the other side of our opening. So we're going to just work it the same way. We are at a reverse stitch now. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to attach it to this edge stitch here. And then my reverse pass, yarn over, pull through 2. All right. Now I'm going to do knit stitch. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to attach to this edge stitch here, the next one. Reverse pass, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, now it's actually, you know what, that was supposed to be a reverse stitch. And I can tell because I've got, it's laying too flat. You know, you're supposed to be getting this ridge. So let me redo that one. One, 2, and 3. Okay, now knit stitch. 1, 2, 3, and attach it. Reverse pass. This is a great little tool to know how you can use this for cuffs at the end of sweater sleeves or on the brim of a hat. So now it's time for a reverse stitch. It's always that first one is a little tricky, but you'll get used to it. Pull your yarn back and get in between those 2 stitches there. You see that? There's the first one, there's the second one, and I'm going to grab that back bar. Grab that back bar. And at first you'll be like, oh, this is hard. I'm not sure if I'm getting it. Now a knit stitch. We'll be done here real soon. And reverse stitch again. You can kind of pull that space open if you need to get in there. Don't be afraid to do that. Attach it to the next one. was a reverse stitch. Now we're doing knit stitch. Go into the next one. And when when we finish with this, you can test it out. It's going to be a snug opening, but it will stretch, and the snug opening will keep it, you know, on your foot really nicely. But if you find that it's a little tight, you can always add an extra row in here. So I started with a reverse stitch here. I just did knit, and now I'm going to do basically like a bind off while connecting it over onto this side. So I'm going to go into that original first chain here, and actually I want my yarn up here before I do that. I want my yarn to the right hand side. So I'm going to yarn over, pull through a loop, and pull that through the loop on my hook. Then I'm going to go into this next stitch, and then the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and slip stitch it, and then go into the next stitch and the next chain. That's from our original chain. Yarn over, pull through a loop, and slip stitch that. And then let's do one more here. Here's our last one right here. Go in there, and we'll go into this chain here. Yarn over and slip stitch that. Now I'm going to do another chain. I'm going to do a couple of chains here, and I'm just going to try this on to make sure that that I can get my foot in there. And even though the opening is going to look a little small, it's probably going to be right. And if not, you can always undo this and do one more row and then redo your slip stitch. So let me check this out. Okay, so mine was a little tight, so I'm going to take this out. This will be good in case it happens to you. Just take that out, and I'm just going to work one more row. It's going to be reverse stitch. One, two, and three. And I'm just going to go into the same stitch from before to attach it. And then yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two, all the way to the end. And now I'm going to join this with a slip stitch. So I will do this like a knit stitch. I'm going to go in as if a knit stitch, and I'm going to go into, actually wait, before I do that, I'm going to go into this first chain right here. Yarn over, pull through a loop, and pull that through the loop on my hook. Then I'm going to go into my next stitch as if to knit. I'm going to go into the next chain from our original chain when we first started the cuff. Yarn over, pull through a loop, and then slip stitch that. I'm going to go into the next stitch as if to knit, go into the next chain from that starting chain, yarn over, pull through a loop, and slip stitch that. I've got one more here, and this side, pull through and slip stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to do another chain. I'm going to just test this to make sure that this one fits, and I think it will. One second. Okay, so that fit perfect. So I'm just going back to my last chain there, and I'm going to cut the yarn, and I'm going to pull that yarn through that loop, pull that nice and snug, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that yarn down into the inside, and I'll sew that in later. So now what we're going to do is we are going to turn this inside out and do the next part. Okay, so the next part is going to be the toe. And for the toe, we're going to work it across this way. So this is our instep seam. Here's where our foot goes in. And this, we're going to sew this up here in the front. So for this, I'm also going to use the 9mm hook. You're welcome to use a sewing needle if you like, but I find that this works nicely for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, you see the, if you kind of turn it inside, you know, pull the what's inside out, you'll see this is our bind off edge here. And these are the stitches that we're going to work into for sewing this up. So this is my instep seam here. So I folded it in half, and I'm going to grab these first two stitches. I'm going to go into one and then the other one, and I'm going to grab my yarn and pull through a loop through both of those. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through a loop like a chain, and I'm going to pull that down nice and snug. All right, and now what I'm going to do is on each of these bind off chains here, I'm going to connect one side with the other side. So here's the first one on this side, and here's the next one on this side. I'm going to yarn over, pull through a loop, and pull it through the loop on my hook. So I'm just going to do that on for each stitch. Go on, one on this side and one on this side. Yarn over and slip stitch. The next one. The next one. Slip stitch. And here we have a little bit of a jump from this stitch to the next one, which is right here. And that's going to be fine because we want that toe kind of closed up a little bit. Then the next one there, and the next one on this side. And there should be one or two left. We'll just go into those. All right, and then I'm just going to pull through one more loop, and I will cut the yarn and just pull that through. All right, so the toe is now done, and all we have left is to sew up the heel. So let's do that now. So when you do your second one, when you start your project, this is our original tail. If you were really smart, which I wasn't, you could make that tail really long, and then you could use that for sewing this up. But I'm just going to start with a new thread. And it really doesn't matter if you start at the bottom or the top. I think I will start here at the top. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the first open stitch on this side and the first open stitch on this side. Just going to put my yarn over the hook, a little bit of a tail, pull that through both sides, and then make a chain. I'm going to take the tail that I just created and pull that nice and tight. And now I'm going to join both sides by going into the edge stitch on each of these. So, and let's see, this is actually our original, this is our original chain. So we're going under one side and then going under the other side. Now, if you wanted to, you could do these as single crochets, and then it will kind of work in those tails. Or you can just do it as slip stitches and sew in the tails later. But I think I'll do it this way, and I'll be done with those tails. Go into one stitch on this side and go into the other chain on this side, yarn over and pull through a loop, do a single crochet. I'm just going to do that all the way down. Just kind of move the yarn out of the way as I go, working in those tails. Find the next one there on this side, and then find the next one on this side. And before you know it, you will be done. And the last one. One on this side. And since we had an odd number, I'm just going to re-go into this other one again over here. And single crochet. Then I'm going to chain one, cut the yarn, pull that loop through, tighten that, and now we just need to sew in the ends. Okay, I've sewn in the ends. Let's turn this inside out and see how it looks. There's our heel. There's our toe. Wow, that looks awesome. So there you go. There is your booty and set, and try them on. And if you are, you might want to make a pair for yourself first to see how your gauge is going. And if you're going to make some for somebody else, make sure you have your measurements. And as far as the instep goes, you'll see how your measurements go when you're doing it. I guess you can lean on the side of caution and have the instep be, leave more room for the opening than less room. So if you want to be cautious, if you're not sure to go one more stitch or not, you can always leave that opening a little bit bigger is better than too tight. So thank you for joining. If you like this video, if you're excited about making these, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. The Crochet Magical Mystery Tour, I have a new video and pattern come out each week. Be sure to give me a comment down below to let me know what you think of these. And if you do make them, please let me know where we can see a picture of yours online. I would love to see them, and I'm sure everybody else would love to see them too. You can link to it on Ravelry, or you can tag me on Instagram at Agent Sully, or you can add it to my Facebook group. And all the links to those things are in the description below. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.